Welcome into Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Today on the show, the Hawks need to play desperate. Falcons can get one of the hot names, and will the Falcons go offense in the first pick of their draft? It's all next. It's Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked On Sports Atlanta.
This is Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it starts now.
Hittin' Hard is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. We ask you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can get the latest episodes of Hittin' Hard as soon as they become available. And then give me a follow on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. Well, game 2 is tonight in Boston, and obviously after the debacle that was game 1 and being down by as much as 32 points, and yeah, they cut it, to a decent margin and things like that, but still they got run off the court in Boston. Hawks need to play desperate tonight, and I don't kind of say that lightly. This could be a real season-saving moment for the Atlanta Hawks. And look, do I expect them to come out and shoot 1 for 16 from 3 like they did on Saturday? Do I expect them to start 2 for their first 22 in shooting the 3 ball like they did on Saturday? No. But again, if you're not going to play some defense to go along with it, then you're going to have all kinds of issues because they're still going to be an efficient offensive team. They're still going to be a juggernaut with all the players that they have and all the depth that they have. But you have to figure out a way to play some defense in this series. You have to figure out a way to stop somebody. And again, I will say, if DeAndre Hunter is not going to give you anything from an offensive perspective, if he's not going to be able to contribute on the offensive end, I can live with that because I do have enough players offensively. I can have Saddiq Bey or John Collins or even Capella to a certain degree. And then obviously Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, Bogey coming off the bench, Jalen Johnson giving me a spark. I can find sparks offensively. But if DeAndre Hunter is not going to give me that offense, then he better sure play outstanding defense. Then he better focus and make his concentration on the defensive end. And the Hawks have to let it all hang out tonight. I mean, this is where if you can find a way to win, then the Hawks have a real shot, I think, in this series. You can find a way to get a victory in Boston against all odds, against all thought process, against with everything working against you, right? The Hawks are not a good road team. They're now 0-4 against the Celtics. Everything is going against you tonight. Let it all hang out. Let it all hang out. If Quinn Snyder's mantra has been for the Hawks to shoot some more threes, look, you can't be afraid to shoot the 3 ball, right? That's where the Hawks make their bread and butter. It's where the Hawks, are with Murray, with Collins, with Trae Young, Bogey. That's where they make their bones, right? Let it all hang out. But there has to be an air of desperation that we probably really haven't seen from this team this year. There probably hasn't been a moment where we've seen desperation out of the Atlanta Hawks. Now's the time. Because if they lose tonight, even if they play well and they lose by 4, let's say, or 6 points, or they make it close and it's all, good and all that kind of stuff, you're going to have zero momentum coming back home because you feel like that you did not do your job up in Boston when you played the Celtics on Saturday. You were coming off a good win where you'd beaten a team that nobody thought you were going to beat. You had all the momentum in the world. The Celtics had not played in 8 days. And you found yourself on the short end of a 32-point, at one point, 32-point, end of this thing. And, you certainly got to 13, but okay, no moral victories and things like that. They got to play desperate tonight. They've got to let it all hang out. If DeAndre Hunter can be that guy on defense, let it hang out. Trae needs a very efficient offensive night. Let it all hang out. They've got to shoot the three ball well in this game tonight. Let it all hang out. Collins and Okongwu have to be rim protectors. They can't just give up the entire middle lane and the middle of the floor like they did in the first half of that game. The Celtics could get to the middle of the floor anytime they wanted and get easy baskets and penetrate, excuse me, and drive to the basket anytime they want in that first half. So if we're going to talk about the idea of, well, they fought, they scratched, they clawed, they got their way back in the game, they had an air of hunger to them, and they found a way to, cut into that deficit and certainly, found a way to bring the game close and blah, 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 blah. Okay, if you're going to sell me on all of that stuff, then you chalk up Saturday afternoon to we just didn't have the numbers. We just didn't have whatever it was, right? We didn't have that gravitas on Saturday afternoon. And now we're past it all, okay? If you're going to sell me on that, then tonight has to be a night where they play desperate and they let it all hang out. What do you got to lose? Nobody thinks you can win this series. Certainly, after being down by 32 points, Boston feels like that they probably, again, I still think Boston, I think part of what Boston did was they took their foot off the gas pedal. I think that's part of what they did. Because you saw in those moments, right? And we talked about this yesterday. You saw in those moments where when for instance, when the Hawks got down to, when they cut the lead to 12 points, right? Bogey hits a big three, and then Bogey has a 3-point play the old way and gets a reverse layup or whatever it was, and he got to the line and made a three. Okay. You saw the Celtics come out and just score 6 straight points at that point. They got it down to 12. Celtics come in and score 6 straight, get it back up to 18. Quinn Snyder's got to call a timeout, and you have to regroup, right? So if you're going to sell me on what they did down the stretch and holding the Celtics to 38 points and blah, 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 and the shooting, and okay, all right. I'll buy all of that. I will give them the chance to show me and prove to me that they can get this thing done. Because you can't sell me on what the second half was and dismiss what the first half of this game was. So if you're going to sell me on that second half, then I need to know that they are going to play desperate tonight. That they are going to play desperate and they are going to find a way to scratch, claw, just like they did against Miami. I mean, just like they did, the 50-50 balls. That was one of the things we talked about yesterday. They did not get after the loose balls. They did not get those hustle plays that they had against Miami. They did not pick up those 50-50 balls, those loose balls that were on the floor. They didn't create the second chance points as they did against Miami. All of those things factor into it, right? And so if you're going to sell me on the idea that they played well in the second half, this, that, and the other, okay, I want to see it. The first, I'll know a lot about the first 6-7 minutes of the first quarter of this game tonight, about what direction that the Hawks are headed and what direction that they are headed for their season. Because they came out and played with an air of desperation, and they come out and they hit some shots and they take the crowd out of it and they get things rolling. Okay. Because again, I don't know how you're going to win this series if you can't find a way to win tonight. If we don't win tonight, I don't care if it's by a buzzer beater and whatever, okay? There's no reason for me to think that the Hawks are going to win this series at all. There's no reason to think that the Hawks are they're going to take all these games and they're going to win in Boston, right? I mean, they take the next 2 at home and they find a way to go back to Boston and win. No, I'm not going to believe any of that kind of stuff. This thing will be, I do believe if they play a lot the way that they did in the game, like they did on Saturday, if they play that way tonight, then this series will be over in 4. And maybe the Hawks find a way to win a game, on their home court and whatever. I think it's Friday and Sunday that they play at State Farm Arena. Maybe they find a way to win a game, But if they don't find a way to win tonight, I don't care what the score is. I really don't. I don't care what the score is. If they don't find a way to win tonight, then this series will be over. Because you haven't proven to me that you can change the momentum and change the dynamic of the game by finding a way to win on the road. And by the way, they haven't even beat Boston one time this year. At least get that victory under your belt and find a way where we can regroup, come home on Friday, and find a way to get things done. All right, let's talk about our friends over at FanDuel. Listen, FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. And if you're a new customer and you sign up to FanDuel, you can claim your no-sweat first bet where you can get as much as $1,000 in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. You download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up today and claim your no-sweat first bet for as much as $1,000 in bonus bets. You want to bet on who's going to win, Braves, Hawks, anything like that? Certainly you can do that. Prop bets, Aaron Judge going to homer. Again, any kinds of prop bets, point spreads, whatever. You can find it all at FanDuel.com/lockedon. So go to FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON and don't miss your chance to claim your no-sweat first bet where you can get as much as $1,000 if your first bet doesn't win. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON. FanDuel is the official sportsbook betting partner of Major League Baseball. So there are some hot names in the NFL draft right now. And again, we go through these cycles, right? I mean, for the longest time, it's been the quarterbacks, and that's been the hot properties and different things like that. But there are 3 names in particular that I'm pointing at because they tie directly into the Atlanta Falcons, okay? The 3 names. First is Tyree Wilson. There are a lot of people think that Tyree Wilson is an elite pass rusher, that he is a guy who, with the size and everything like that, he can be a dominant player at the NFL level, okay? Next guy, Myles Murphy. I've seen a lot of reports that are coming out now about the idea of Myles Murphy may be the second best edge player only behind Will Anderson of Alabama. That Myles Murphy, the scouting is that his athleticism, his size, he can play the run, he can do just about everything. That he is becoming the hot property of NFL teams. And then obviously the other one is a guy that's meeting with the Falcons this week is Jalen Carter. And we know that his athleticism, we know that his ability, he might be the best player, he might be the best talent, I should say, in the NFL draft. All of that is come together, and for all the things that people want to point to in the, on the off-field stuff and different things like that, can completely understand that. But you can't deny what his talent is on the football field. You can't deny that he's been one of the best defenders for the best defense in America over the last couple of years. And for a program that churns out all kinds of high caliber defensive players, you can't deny what his talent is. So Tyree Wilson, Myles Murphy, Jalen Carter. Okay. Why do I bring those names up? Not just because that they're hot prospects and they're making a name for themselves and, they're moving up the draft boards, if you will. I don't know how that happens, but, again, if you believe that the hype and the hoopla and different things like that, they're moving up the draft boards and all this good kind of stuff, right? I bring them up because the Atlanta Falcons are going to have a chance to get their hands on one or a couple of those guys that are going to be available at number 8. Now, I don't know if Wilson's going to be available at 8. I don't think that Murphy won't be available at 8. I think he's the most likely guy to be available at 8. I don't know if Jalen Carter is going to be available at 8. But this is where I talk about that by even just sitting at 8, because again, I know the idea, we can trade back and all this. Okay, well, somebody has to trade up, right? I mean, there has to be that equal and opposite reaction to what you want to do. Somebody has to want to covet your pick to go up to number 8, wherever that person is, wherever that spot is in the draft pecking order. Somebody has to want to go up and make a move on all of this. But Murphy, Wilson, and Carter, one of those guys or multiples of those guys are going to be there for the Falcons to draft. And this is why I've talked about don't overthink this. Don't oversimplify. Don't think too deep about this. Pick one of those three guys if they're available, and they certainly will be, because again, I still think the quarterbacks are going. I think the first 7 picks are going to have at least 3, if not a 4th quarterback. And Will Anderson's going to be in that mix. And yeah, Wilson or Carter or Murphy could potentially go, but you're going to get your hands on one of those guys by sitting at 8. By letting the draft unfold to you, you're going to find a way to grab a hold of one of those players. And this should be very easy for Fontenot, right? And Arthur and everybody involved in all this kind of stuff. Grab you one of those high caliber defensive players and figure out a way to get it done with adding more pass rush, adding another impact player, adding another high caliber impact young player to this defensive line. And don't monkey around with it. Now, I will say that we'll talk about this in a second here, that this could be lining up to be an offensive-minded draft when we get to the first round. But in my world, at least for what I want and at least for where I'm looking at, if those guys are the 3 players that seem to be catching some fire and catching some momentum as far as top 10 picks, right? I mean, Carter, we always knew was a guy that had, a high caliber, high ceiling. Obviously, he's maybe the best talent in the draft. We all knew that. But Carter doesn't seem to be falling as far as some people think that he's going to fall. He's certainly not going to get out of the top 10. I don't care what any mock tells you, whatever like that. He's not going to get past the Falcons, Bears, and Eagles at 8, 9, and 10. That's not going to happen. So he's going to be in the top 10, just a matter of where his actual landing spot is going to be. And Murphy is another guy who, again, I've seen that they are talking about he's the second best edge player for all the things, for his athleticism and all the things that he does. He might be the second best edge player, and literally only Will Anderson may be a better edge player than what he is. And Tyree Wilson is sort of that unknown commodity that's rising up boards. I saw something that said that, and again, I'll take all of this with a grain of salt, that Murphy could be the number 2 or number 3 pick when all is said and done. Or sorry, Tyree Wilson could be the number 2 or number 3 pick when all is said and done. Okay. I don't know that Tyree Wilson, and it's not a matter of his talent or things like that or his upside. I just don't think that when you figure quarterbacks and Will Anderson and some of those people that, he's going to be the number 2 or number 3 pick or whatever like that. But again, listen, if you want pass rush, if you want a guy who can go sack the quarterback, you have to get a little bit desperate in these things, right? You have to go grab one of these guys. So I will tell you that the Falcons are sitting in their prime position, and they can let the draft just unfold to them. Just let the draft unfold to them, okay? Yeah, it might be great if you can trade back or this or that or whatever, and, maybe you trade back to the high teens or, grab Lucas Van Ness and all that kind of stuff. But again, I keep saying that, trade can't be one-sided. A trade can't happen from just one side. Somebody has to want to get up into the number 8 spot. And the way you figure the draft capital and everything like that, it's just not advantageous for a lot of teams. When you start having to give up second and thirds and stuff like that, or, potentially, depending on where you trade from, another number 1 pick for next year, a lot of teams just don't want to do that. That's why you see these trades of just like one spot, right? You see like just one spot trades, 9 to 10, 9 and 10 flip, 8 and 9 flip, 14 and 15 flip. You see that, all the time. But the Falcons are in a prime position that they can get themselves or have a pick of 1 or 2 guys that are the hot names going into this draft. And again, we saw all this kind of shake out, right? The Falcons weren't going to be, I think, in the quarterback business. I don't think that they were going to be in that business of drafting a quarterback at number 8. Maybe unless CJ Stroud fell, but we'll talk about that in just a second here. But other than that, they've got 3 hot names that are moving up everybody's draft board. And there's no reason why the Falcons can't grab a hold of one of those guys and figure out how to add them to that defensive line when all is said and done. All right, once you make Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen, make sure you go in and leave us a comment about being an everyday listener. We want to hear from our everydayers, as we call them. So when you go listen to Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery, no matter what platform that you are on, leave us a message and leave us a note that you are an everyday listener. So we thank you so much for listening to Hittin' Hard, but make sure you leave us a note that you are an everyday listener of the program to us. So what's interesting is that with all of the money that the Falcons have spent on their defense, now they just added Bud Dupree, right? End of last week. And obviously Onyemata, Caden Ellis, Jesse Bates, Jeff Okudah they traded for, right? They've added all of these defensive players, re-signed Lorenzo Carter, right? We've added all of these defensive pieces to our roster. It does make you wonder that are the Falcons going to potentially grab an offensive player at 8? Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to look at Bijan Robinson or a wide receiver or a quarterback. And again, I'm not in the quarterback business unless CJ Stroud falls. And then if he falls to 8, okay, now we got something. That would be the one guy that I would tell you that from an offensive skill position perspective, I would grab a hold of all day long, more than Bijan Robinson. I know he's a bigger talent, he's comparable talent and all this kind of stuff. Certainly more than pass catcher or anything like that. But it does make you wonder. D-Led brought this up to me. D. Orlando Ledbetter, beat writer for the Falcons for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He brought this up to me the other day, the idea of, are things setting up to go with offense? We're sitting here and looking. The Falcons signed a rotational offensive lineman yesterday from the Saints, right? Certainly nobody who's going to compete for a starting job. Certainly nobody who's going to set the world on fire or anything like that. A guy who hasn't played since the pandemic year of 2020, right? But this could be, I don't want to call it a swerve, bro, but this could definitely be a swerve. And look, if the Falcons do draft an offensive lineman, if they draft a skill position player, pass catcher, running back, or Levis or Richardson or something like that, I'm gonna have my head in my hands and just be like, what are we doing? What's the direction of our franchise? I'm gonna question that pick. But there is also, we talked about the defensive line guys. All of the offensive linemen should by and large be there. Whether you want Skoronski, whether you want Paris Johnson, whether you want Broderick Jones, if you identify and feel like that those are 3 premier offensive linemen, certainly guys that can play both on the outside and on the inside. Paris Johnson is a guy that played a season at guard for Ohio State. He started 13 games at guard. Skoronski, for a lot of people, profiles out as a better guard than what he's going to be as a tackle, that he profiles more as an interior offensive lineman in the NFL than playing on the outside. And I've got no problem with that either. Look, you have to take your strengths in the NFL and you have to build off of your strength. You take something that is your best positional group and you add real high caliber pieces to it. Now, me personally, from a personal perspective, I'm not saying what Arthur Terry is going to do, and I'm not saying what they should do and this, that, and the other. From a personal perspective, I want more pass rush. I think we can sign a guard and upgrade. I don't like anybody in-house. I don't like any of our in-house options. I don't like Mayfield. I don't like Hittin, and I don't like, Hennessy, or, I don't like any of our in-house options. But certainly I could live with, if you find a way to draft at number 8, an offensive lineman, Skoronski, Paris Johnson, Broderick Jones, If that's where you go at number 8, then I got no problem with that. Then I've got no problem whatsoever drafting one of those guys, because it's building off of your strength, taking a good, strong unit and making it even better. And that may be when you look at the Falcons in what they want to do. If that offense becomes a little bit more balanced like we think it is, and I'm not saying Desmond Ridder going to huck it around, but if that offense becomes a little bit more balanced from what we think it is going to be last year, where they're the only team in the NFL to call more run plays than pass plays, and that thing starts to balance out or creep over to the passing side of things, because you do have all of this high draft capital. I mean, it doesn't make sense to just run the football all the time, and you've drafted Drake London and Kyle Pitts. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And you've traded for Jonnu Smith, and you've got all these pieces that are pass catchers, that the only way that they make a big impact is to pass catch. I certainly hope that we didn't, I keep hearing this thing about, Kyle Pitts is a good blocker. Okay. What do I need Kyle Pitts to block for? Like, with all due respect, I don't want Kyle Pitts blocking. I want him to catch 1,300 yards and a dozen touchdowns, right? I want him to come right off the edge and just catch 1,300 yards and 12 touchdowns. That's what I need Kyle Pitts to do. Kyle Pitts can't affect the football game if he's not doing that at number 4. I could have drafted an offensive line. I could have drafted Penei Sewell to do that. Could have drafted Penei Sewell to protect our offensive line and do that. But it does make you wonder that how much is offense coming into play with all of the additions that the Falcons have made on their defense, and not just their defensive line, but obviously with Jeff Okudah at corner, obviously adding Jesse Bates, Mike Hughes, right? Keeping Casey Hayward. We talked about this last week about maybe the future of Hayward. Would it surprise me? Again, I'm going to just, my gut is telling me that the play is going to be cornerback. I don't know why. I don't really have a reason why, but it seems to me like the play is going to be cornerback, I should say. But I'm wondering if offensive side of the ball isn't becoming a prominent thing, and that we're going to potentially see an offensive player, maybe most likely offensive line, but skill position, I hate to say, and I cringe when I say this, that could be coming on board with another skill position player at number 8. All right, thank you so much for making Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen every day. So we want you to leave us a comment about being an everyday listener, right? So when you go online, you listen to us, make sure you leave in the comment section about being an everydayer, as we like to call them. So we thank you so much. We're up over 6,000 folks on our YouTube page. So be an everyday listener and leave us a comment letting us know that you are one of those folks. You can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast from. Get the latest episodes of Hittin' Hard as soon as they become available. And again, I've asked you to follow me on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. We'll be back with you tomorrow. This has been Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked on Sports Atlanta.